Hello friends, welcome to another video. Today I'm going to talk about how this hobby basically led me into my career choices and the machining hobby. Let's get into it. So, the main interest I had when I was little was aviation and electronics. Electronics ended up being my career choice just because that was easy options for me. There was trade schooling, I could get my electronic engineering, I saw job opportunities in the future for it. That's the way it went. Super glad I did. Led to a lot of great things in the future. What I was passionate about was flying model airplanes. I had a gas trainer back in the day. Once again, it was very expensive to get into this stuff. I had to fly to AMA fields. I still have that gas trainer. I think I've flown it twice, maybe 3 times. It wasn't something I was comfortable learning on because I was young enough. I was terrified of it. It was a big gas engine. It would chop your finger off. And it wasn't easy. You couldn't just go into your backyard. Like nowadays, you can just grab a little plane or a little drone or whatnot and go fly and teach yourself to fly. They're incredibly simple. Back then, not so much. You had to usually have somebody to fly with you or just kind of learn you the ropes because you didn't want to crash your $2,000 investment into the ground because you have to buy it all again. So that kind of floundered along for a few years. I never had much opportunity to fly it. I was always interested in it. Simulators really weren't a thing. So what I got into majorly when it was more cost effective was electric flight. Electric flight came out. That's why we were talking about this controller. This is actually my secondary controller, 72 megahertz flying air radio. I actually had a high-tech 4-channel, but I don't know where that is right now. That was a total game changer because now for relatively inexpensive, I think it cost me $2,000 to set up for electric flight for my slow stick back in the day. I taught myself to fly on that thing because I lived out in the country. I had loads of room. Rudder, elevator, throttle, very easy to control. Crashed it a few times, but it was something that you could just kind of mend together with tape and glue and keep going. And I flew the crap out of that thing and modified it and built so many different variants of it. And as soon as I was comfortable flying it, the first thing I did was put a camera on it because for some reason that just in my head, that's all I wanted to do was have pictures from the air. I wanted to fly myself in the sky and be able to see. And at the time, this just wasn't an option. So the next best thing I could do was put a camera on it and take pictures. We're not even taking videos yet. Like portable little cameras that I'm talking about were still like 7, 8, 12, 15 ounces. So you had to have a fairly large plane and fairly decent power to get it in the sky. And taking video was like 420 or like 480 video was like, whew, you're lucky if you get that. And you're limited to maybe like 15-second clips. The technology wasn't there for it yet. But I took a lot of pictures. I actually changed that into a small business when I was still in high school or junior high or something like that. I would take pictures of people's yards. I'd go and get their pictures developed and bring them back to them. And I'd sell them at a cost that made no sense. But it was something I enjoyed doing. And it gave me a lot of experience. And that was my first main foray into a business. So fast forward, I carried along and basically I went to school for electronic engineering, like I said, got a job, blah, 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 all that stuff. The next major kind of turning point was when 3D printers and CNC machines were kind of introduced to me. I knew 3D printers existed. Like I said, shortly after school I got out, MakerBot was coming out with the Cupcake. The Cupcake just didn't really, I wasn't passionate about it. I just saw the way it laid material down. I'm like, that's going to take forever. So what I got big into was CNC machines. There wasn't a kit. You couldn't get a Shapeoko. You couldn't get an other mill. You couldn't just order a cheap, inexpensive kit off Amazon. Amazon wasn't selling crap. They were still a book company. You couldn't dip your toe into the hobby CNCing world without building your own. So I built my own. There's a Jurgo, JGRO, JRGO, one of the two. Open source plans for a CNC machine you can make out of stuff you get from the hardware store, like MDF and all-thread rod. I built my first one in my apartment. You could build with a hacksaw and a jigsaw. Yes, I had a hacksaw, or I had it, not hacksaw, sorry, a jigsaw and a table saw. I had a table saw in the spare room of my apartment. And I just opened the windows and cut it and let all the MDF dust get outside and try to block off the rest of my apartment. Anyways, made a CNC machine in my apartment and just was blown away that I could now take a digital design on the computer and put it into something and have something created. I mean, it ran at like 15, 20 inches per minute, but just the fact that I could cut something with relative amount of precision just was unbelievable. And I directly used those to make different parts for my airplanes, and it just worked perfectly. Shortly after I had my CNC machines running, I realized, okay, I'm going to use my CNC machine to make a better CNC machine, and I designed my own machine based off a couple of machines I saw, and some V-bearings and all kinds of stuff that was slowly starting to become more available. And once again, like these things, it still wasn't cheap. Like you can buy a whole CNC machine now for like a few $100. Back then you're spending like close to $1,000 just for the electronics, and you still have to build the damn thing. And then not to mention the software, like you couldn't run Fusion for free. Like the cheapest option you had, you could borrow SolidWorks from the internet. I ended up going to Libra because the only one I could afford. It was still like a few $1,000s to get a professional license in it. Taught myself that. Actually taught myself Kanban before that, but don't worry about that. Right, 3D printers. So now 3D printers came out with something I was actually interested in. There was the RepRap movement, which I was very passionate about, and there was the MakerBot movement, which they had just released the Thing-O-Matic, and to me that was the cream of the crop of 3D printers. I couldn't believe how amazing it was, how quick it was, how accurate it was, and the kind of prints it was cranking out. So I bought one. It was like $2,200 Canadian back in the day. It was a lot of money for a 3D printer, which was deemed still a toy, and like no one had 3D printers. I was super psyched for it. I still have it. I keep it just for that reason, because of the joy it brought me initially running it and just cranking prints out of on it. There's some prints on YouTube, or maybe Vimeo, I think, because YouTube still wasn't quite a thing. There's videos on Vimeo of me printing some stuff. One of the first things I did as soon as I got my MakerBot running, my Thing-O-Matic, is I cranked up parts for a Prussian Mendel, because I just thought RepRap was so cool. Open source was, I mean, MakerBot was still open source at that point, but it was just, I was amazed that I could use a 3D printer to make another 3D printer. So I spent another few $1,000s on electronics to make a fully functioning Prussian Mendel, and that was cool. It was very low, by today's standard, very, very, very low quality electronics. But they were the best you could get at the time. You just couldn't buy any, like you couldn't get it online. You had, I mean, you could, but you'd have to go through specific companies, and it was still a lot of money. After the Prussian Mendel, I built a Cells Mendel, then I built like 5 or 6 other 3D printers because I was super interested in it. And same with the CNC, I just kept designing new CNC machines and making new ones, and it became like that home fabrication just blew my mind, that what I could do. And I would build planes, and then I would realize I needed more tools to build planes, or tools to build circuit boards, and I'd build more tools, and it snowballed so quickly. So now that I had my little fabrication shop set up in my apartment, like I said, spare room, it was just my little den where I could make everything, things started to eke out into the kind of consumer market. Electric flight for airplanes got significantly more cheaper. Drones, I say drones, we never call them drones, quadcopters or tricopters. Tricopters specifically were just making their way onto the forums, and people were finding ways to hack it. I built my very first tricopter with like 4 gyros. You'd use rate gyros, and then 1 heading hold gyro, and servos and speed controllers. And you didn't have a controller board. You had gyros that you'd mix as swash plate mixing into old rusty radios like this. There's a reason I bought this one, because it had heli mixing, and I needed heli mixing to fly. Drones, which was a bad word back in the day. DIY drones was just coming out. I was big into that community as well. Still horrendously expensive. They didn't have FPV downlinks, they didn't have all this stuff. GoPro just came out with their Hero 1, which I have a bunch of because I smashed so many into the ground over the years flying those things, because I like I said, as soon as I had the option to put HD footage on an airplane, I jumped right on it, even though they were still like 4 or 5 ounce cameras, or 3 or 4 ounce cameras. I was crazy about them, so bought a bunch of those. So that was something I was incredibly interested in. I used my knowledge kind of electronics. I started modifying radios. 2.4 gigahertz communication on radios was the big thing that was coming out. I jumped onto that. I put patch antennas on my radios, and did custom antennas on the transmitters. This was 900 megahertz video downlink, which was that blew my mind. Now that we can have a video communication back to the ground. So once again, the equipment you could buy then was expensive. It wasn't cheap. You couldn't get low quality equipment. It was either this quality equipment, ultra high quality, medium quality, or nothing. So I went with medium quality equipment, and it was like, yeah, 500 milliwatt transmitters at 900 megahertz. You had to have ham radio license to run it. So at this point, my little world was set up pretty good. Planes were right where I wanted them. I could essentially fly from the pilot seat. There was no goggles yet. People were still modifying goggles that came future down the road. We were looking at, like, we'd hack DVD monitors to have little ground stations. I still have my huge ground station. I totally glossed over the topic of helis. I got big into helis, like, midway between the ramblings I've had here. I got a bunch of helicopters. I've probably been spicing them into this video, but I totally forgot about them. That was another thing, learning to fly helis. Anyways, back to the future now. Forward to the future. So basically at this point, moved out of my apartment, bought a house. Just before I bought my house, actually, for some unforsaken reason, I don't know why, I decided I needed a lathe. So I bought this TAG lathe, which is sitting right beside me, that has now been severely upgraded. I don't know, I don't even remember why I bought the lathe initially. I think it was a kind of an impromptu purchase. It was fairly inexpensive, so I picked it up. And then that opened up a whole new world. I realized with my lathe and my CNC machine, now my CNC machines could be bigger because they didn't have to be in an apartment. They could be louder because I didn't have to worry about neighbors, and I didn't have to build big enclosures around them to keep them quiet, which I did in my apartment, which really complicated things. I decided I needed a better CNC machine. So I took my heavily modified personal design CNC machine, and I bought the plans for one of the best machines that I saw at the time, which is the machine you're currently sitting on, which is the Momus CNC. You can still buy plans for it. I think it's a hell of a machine. For cutting aluminum, basically non-ferrous stuff. Great. I'm very happy with it. I mean, nowadays you wouldn't probably build your own because you just buy a Shape Oco or something and modify it. But you still, at that point, you still couldn't buy a nice turnkey CNC solution. There was some talk about companies coming up with their own, but it wasn't. It was still vaporware, so you had to still build your own. Built this once again. Drivers, steppers, all that stuff was very expensive because you had to buy high quality crap. You couldn't buy like offshore steppers. You had to buy from all the main manufacturers like Gecko or Kelling or whatever. I think they just came out with kind of the low budget end, but you're still looking at $800, $500 for a CNC setup. Anyways, built that all up to the best of my ability and love this machine. That's why it is still here. That's why I still use it, because I haven't found a need to do anything else with it. I don't do big projects, so that was perfect. That was my CNC mill for a very long time. With my lathe and this, I realized that I basically was unstoppable and got heavily into starting to use it as custom work for people and building stuff, and that created a website, which I then did custom work, and I did everything from 3D printing weird cosplay stuff to machining weird parts to doing parts for hi-fi stereo guys, doing casting, doing all kinds of weird crap just because I wanted to learn as much as I possibly could, and by outsourcing my skills like that, I could pay for the hobby. The hobby could pay for itself, and basically I'd funnel all that money right back into the hobby, right back into the learning. And it was enjoyable, and I loved it, and I carried on with that for a while until I finally got massively hooked on building pens. So that was the massive roundabout tour on how I eventually got to building pens. Once again, the only reason I built a pen is because I wanted a pen. I figured it was a nice, easy project to turn. I turned that, and then I kind of just went hog wild down that road of building pens. I still did custom work. I'm still doing custom work. The reason I actually haven't released videos in like a month is because I've had a couple clients that I don't really open myself to custom work anymore, just because I don't much enjoy it, and I don't really do machining as a full-time job. Like I said, I do have a full-time job. I do it because I'm passionate about it, and pens is something I'm passionate about. Custom work, not so much, but I have a few kind of long-standing clients that I still do work for because they're good people, and the projects are cool, and it pays bills, and the money is decent from it. So I keep those in mind. That's what I've been doing for the last month, hence no communication with you folks. But now we can change that. And to just tie this whole journey together, I have something cool. So what's this cool surprise? Well, it's kind of like I said, a circuitous route. Secure, is that a word? Roundabout route back to saying that maybe I'll shoot a little bit more video of my flying and my hobbies. And I mean, I've been flying the entire time I've been shooting these videos. There's so much enjoyment that I have in this aspect of it. When I video this, I kind of get tapped out. I don't want to do any more video of the flying stuff. But now, I mean, it's beautiful outside, and since I've been doing a lot of just custom work in here that I can't film, I've been doing a lot more of this flying, and I've actually been shooting more video of this flying, which is very interesting to me. This is a very low-priced 5-inch racing quad, freestyle quad, whatever you want to call it. It's just funny because even though this is all low-quality equipment, the price to entry for something like this is you can get into this for like $300 or $400. It's light years ahead of what was available even a decade ago. It's unbelievable. It's the first time I kind of dipped my toe into the new world of FPV. I have my old FPV system, like 900 megahertz system I told you about. That's, you gotta have a ham license to operate, and it's not something I'm comfortable running in the city just because of its power output. But nowadays with like a 5 gigahertz system, and I mean the drone laws in Canada, but that's a different video. We won't talk about that. I have my license, yay! But don't worry about that. It's just amazing what you can get nowadays in all aspects of this, in the machining hobby, in everything. There's zero barrier to entry anymore. Cost is out the window. You can get inexpensive CNC machines and inexpensive lathes, and electronics are just at a rock bottom price. It's incredible. Even for high quality equipment, if you want to build one, like this is low quality, you want to build one of these in high quality, it's like $1,000. That's like half the price I paid getting into just planes, and there's no excuse. And it's something I'm very happy to be back into. And maybe I'll shoot more video of it. Anyways, I don't even know what this video was about. It was just something that was on my mind for like the last month. It was something I wanted to put out, and I haven't talked to you guys in a while, and I want to talk to you. So we'll leave it at that. Until next time, see you guys later. Take care. Bye.